Welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of Will Talks About Games. My name is Will, and I'm here to talk about games. That's what you gotta like about this podcast, right? It's straight up on the nose. I'm Will, I'm here to talk about video games. Like, how more direct can you get than that, right? So, it's been a while since the last one, a few weeks. So, we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna talk about the Postal AI slop situation. There was a game that was supposed to come out and it got canceled. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're also going to discuss the Subnautica 2 drama, and we're going to discuss the latest on the EA Saudi purchase, where that's at, that might be in danger, and what that still could mean. So for those of you guys watching on YouTube, if you're just coming across this for the first time, I like to do videos about indie games, retro games, and also game-related hardware. So I did an unboxing video about the Switch 2 a few weeks ago, so if that's your groove and you're not already subscribed, hit that big red button. You can join the Mafia and I'll make you a made man. If you want to do me one better, hit that bell icon, make sure your notifications are turned on. That's for those of you watching on YouTube. For those of you listening outside of YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever this podcast is hosted, check out my YouTube page. It's in the description. It's got tons of great stuff. So if you like the podcast and you like video games, I got tons more stuff there. There are game reviews, hardware unboxings, all kinds of cool stuff. So enough of that, let's dive right into it. Well, before we do that, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night on YouTube, I will be live streaming the Game Awards. Matter of fact, I'll be cross-streaming across Twitch, YouTube, Bijo Live, and TikTok. So whatever your platform choice is, just add Screwface Capone. I hope to see you there tomorrow night. We're going to look at the trailers, react to them, and see who's got the big awards. Now, after that's done, we can dive in. So first up, in what seems to be the fastest announcement to cancellation timeline, last week, Running with Scissors, the studio behind the Postal franchise, had announced a new game called Postal Bullet Paradise. So it's a spin-off of Postal. For those that don't know, Postal is basically like this edgelord shoot 'em up. Like, the first game came out in like the late 90s, and it had this very dark vibe where you carry out mass shootings and stuff. But it was basically hinted to be like some kind of dream or some kind of psychosis or whatever. The second entry, that's where the series really took off, because now it was like this open world sandbox type thing where you could shoot as much or as little, and thankfully these series took a more humorous tone. There was a third game that came out, but of course it was so bad because it got pimped out to I don't want to say pimped out, but it got farmed out to another development studio, and the reception of it was so bad that Running with Scissors pretty much denies that ever existed. And there was a fourth game that was released a few years ago in also a retro style shooter spinoff called Postal Brain Damage. So this, and I think there was another like a free game that was released on Steam. I haven't checked it out yet, but I have downloaded it. So this new game that was coming out, that was going to be a first-person Vampire Survivors like roguelike shoot 'em bullet heaven shooter. So like if you played Vampire Survivors, you got like the tons of enemies surrounding you, then that's kind of what that game was going to be like, except it was going to be like a first-person shooter. So if you want to know an example of that, check out Bloodshed. It's a similar style game that's on Steam. So anyway, when the trailer was showed off last week, a lot of people basically accused the developer of having AI assets within the game. So what happened was there was a lot of bullying, and I don't know if it was bullying or what, or like accusations of people accusing the developer. The developer's name is called Goom Swarm Games, so those are the people who are actually developing it. And I believe Running with Scissors is publishing it. So a lot of Postal fans had accused Goon Swarm Games of using generative AI artwork in the game's creation. So the co-owner of Running with Scissors, Mike Jarrett, he had fought back against claims that Bullet Paradise was actually using AI art assets. However, a few days later, it was announced via Twitter that the studio had actually killed the project due to automated responses. So I'm actually looking at this at the Polygon website. So here's the actual tweet from Running with Scissors. Quote: after revealing Postal Bullet Paradise, the title Running with Scissors was planning on publishing but not developing, we've been overwhelmed with negative responses from our concerned Postal community. The strong feedback from them is that elements of the game are likely AI generated, and thus has caused extreme damage to our brand and our company reputation. We've always been and always will be transparent with our community. Our trust in the development team is broken, therefore we've killed the project. We have a lot of good things coming, some you know and some you don't. Since forming Running with Scissors in 1996, we've always said that our fans are part of the team. Our priority is to always do right by the millions who support the Postal franchise. We are grateful for the opportunity to make games we want to play, and will continue to focus our new projects and updates coming in 2026 and beyond. We can't wait to share more, unquote. Alright, and there's another tweet below it from them. So let's see, quote, we'd like, of course, to apologize to anyone who felt insulted in the heat of the moment, and we thank you for raising concerns at the time. As for those who specifically sent us death threats, the apology does not apply. So if you check the Twitter thread, which I'll link in the description, like there's been a lot of people posting a lot of back and forth between people from RWS and the Postal community. So it's not beneficially confirmed whether the developer being Goon Swarm Games, had actually used generative AI. But to me, the whole message on Twitter and the whole reaction kind of gives off suspect vibes. Now, I'm not saying that they did it or not, but it's kind of looking at that in that direction. Because if they weren't using generative AI, then basically just try to stand on that and release the game anyway. But now, if there's a case where the developers actually didn't use generative AI and they were being falsely accused with it, it is a pretty scummy thing on the part of the fan base or the people who were actually calling out Goon Swarm Games. Because like I can't stand generative AI either. To me, it's lazy and there's like lots of ethics issues, especially when it comes to like user rights. And when you see these Sora videos nowadays with real people in them, and there definitely needs to be some kind of regulation behind them. But at the same time, let's not get into this furor over it that we're accusing anything and everything of being AI slop if it acts a certain way. And I know like with the whole thing behind the like if you remember like earlier this year you had those people making the AI images in the style of Hayao Miyazaki or whatever, and it came to a point where Japanese creators were taking a stance against it, even being willing to sue. So I think like it's kind of like turned into this poison pen where it's where if you got like something of a certain look, then you'll have people who will accuse it of being AI. Now later on in the Polygon article, there's been a message released by Goon Swarm Games. So last Friday they released a statement saying that it had been falsely accused of using generative AI and that the studio was shutting down as a result of the controversy. Quote, our studio was mistakenly accused of using AI generated art in our games, and every attempt to clarify our work only escalated the situation, reads a statement from Goon Swarm Games. And again, I'm reading from the Polygon article. In the last few hours, we've received a number of threats, insults, and mockery, which pushed us toward a very difficult decision. We're truly sorry for the artists who put their soul into this and support our studio only to face false AI accusations. It's tough to pour so much energy into a game and end up caught in the middle of an AI war by accident. Now, I wasn't there and I don't know these developers personally, and I'm not here to say whether or not they did use AI. And if they didn't, this is pretty sad that they had to close down their studio, because it looks like this was going to be a huge source of funding for them. And especially if gamers were sending harassment and death threats and stuff like that, that's never a black eye on the gaming community. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments. Though one thing I will say is that if the game was using generative AI, that kind of flies in the face of what the Postal series is known for, this edgy anti-establishment stuff. AI being the whole big new trend right now. With all the tech bros and shit like hyping this up as the next big thing, kind of flies into the face of that edgy anti-establishment attitude. But again, let me know what you guys think. Now I will say this though, a bullet hell vampire survivors type shooter in the Postal universe wouldn't be a bad idea. Just don't use AI slop with it. That's all I'm saying. So speaking of AI, that kind of brings me to my second story. It looks like the CEO of Krafton, Chang-Han Kim, has asked ChatGPT to brainstorm a way to help him avoid paying a $250 million earnout bonus to developer Unknown Worlds. Unknown Worlds is a developer behind Subnautica 2. As you may or may not know, the founders of Unknown Worlds, Ted McGill, Max McGuire, and Charlie Cleveland, were fired from the studio earlier this year by Krafton, and they are involved in legal action against the publisher over the said $250 million bonus. So let me write it back from the beginning. In 2021, Unknown Worlds was purchased by Krafton for a total of $500 million, with a promised $250 million bonus if the studio had met certain revenue goals. Apparently, these revenue goals were tied to the release of Subnautica 2, which was slated to go into early access this year. Now, Krafton, as you may know, is the publisher behind games such as PUBG Battlegrounds and the recently released Enzoy and the life simulation game Dinkum. So there's a very helpful timeline on WCCF Tech, which I'll be reading from, that basically gives you the bullet points of the lawsuit. So I'm going to be paraphrasing this, and I'll link to this in the description so you can get a deeper dive into it. Anyway, so on July 2nd, that's when the three founders were fired, and they were replaced by former Striking Distance Studios head Steve Papostis. I can't really pronounce it, so there was no reason given for the firing at the time. So also around this time, Krafton had decided to delay Subnautica 2 into early 2026 due to the company's belief that the game wasn't ready for early access at the time. However, on a Reddit thread, Charlie Cleveland had claimed that Subnautica 2 was indeed ready for early access and that his dismissal along with his other co-founders was a shock. Now, on July 9th, a report from Bloomberg had contained the allegation that Krafton had delayed the game to avoid paying out that $250 million bonus that we mentioned earlier. Of course, Krafton went on the offensive and denied this and claimed that the co-founders who were fired, Gill, Cleveland, and McGuire, they had abandoned their roles to pursue quote-unquote personal interest. They had also stated that 90% of the aforementioned $250 million bonus would go directly to the co-founders, with the rest to be split among the employees. However, the three co-founders had claimed that they'd always intend to split the bonus among their team members. So July 10th, that's when the three ex-employees, the co-founders, had officially filed their lawsuit against Krafton. So I'm going to read these next few bullet points directly. So, quote, on July 11th, an internal document from a milestone review of Subnautica 2's progress leaked on Reddit, seemingly showing further support to Krafton's claims that the game wasn't ready, citing a lack of content on top of previously mentioned internal playtest feedback. After that, over the following week on July 13th, Krafton confirmed the documents to be real. Now I'm looking at the document that was leaked on Reddit right now, so it's basically a final recommendation chart. Final recommendation proposed to launch with a MVP level build that allows players to experience the core loop, survival, gathering, crafting, exploration, etc. at a high level of quality. The current version of SN2 is expected to deliver certain level of performance based on existing fandom, but it is deemed to lack the level of polish and market impact required to drive IP growth and expansion. To develop SN2 into Krafton's global franchise IP, it is recommended to enhance the content volume and level of polish before launching, so that it can appeal to a broader market from the EA release stage. Now, of course, they're showing a graph, which is the game as is, and what looks to be a roadmap is what the game would be. So the as is, like, you have like 2 biomes, 12 creatures and 2 leviathans, and a little amount of equipment. So the 2B section is obviously going to add a bit more, like a second region, more creatures, and this, that, and the third. It's saying that it's lacking a level of now I want to speak on this for a little bit. I don't want to be taking sides here, but I want to add my commentary. So it's saying that the current version of SN2 is expected to deliver a certain level of performance based on its existing fandom, but it is deemed to lack the level of polish and market impact required to drive IP growth and expansion. But part of me is thinking, like, this is why the game's being launched into early access. Like, early access, now, of course, the early access thing is a double-edged sword, because we have seen it where developers have put games out on early access just to make a quick buck and seemingly abandoned them. But like with the level of prestige that Subnautica 2 has and the company behind it, it wouldn't be unrealistic to see them using that early access date. Like, the whole point of early access, right, is to release like a playable build of the game while using player feedback to learn where to improve on that game and to add what other options they can improve on. Now, I never played the original Subnautica, but I looked at the Steam pages for it, and it's I guess a standalone spinoff below Zero, and they both got pretty positive reviews. So Unknown Worlds doesn't really strike me as a developer that would just take the money and run after dropping the game on early access. So, of course, Krafton... Now, it's not a matter of if these documents were faked or not, because Krafton themselves did confirm that the documents are real as a way of minimizing speculation. At least according to what they're saying in this WCCF Tech article, which I'll also link to in the description. Now, back to the timeline. So, a few days later, on July 17th, when the co-founder's suit against Krafton became publicly available, we discovered allegation that Krafton had been sabotaging Subnautica 2 to ensure it would be delayed, we being the people at WCCF Tech. There was even a claim that the CEO of Krafton met with the co-founders and admitted that having to pay out the $250 million bonus could be disastrous financially and hugely embarrassing for Krafton. It also attacks every other claim Krafton has made up to that point, and that the speculation received on Subnautica 2 playtesting without a doubt proved that the game was ready for an early access launch. Jumping ahead to August 12, Krafton shoots back at Gil, Cleveland, and McGuire's lawsuit, again arguing that the co-founders were absentee leaders who abandoned their roles and continued to hold that the game wasn't ready for early access launch. Here's where things get interesting. So in the next point, 8 days later, Unknown Worlds files its own separate lawsuit against its co-founders, telling WCCF Tech in an email that this suit is a direct response to their misconduct, including the theft of confidential information and attempts to pursue personal financial gain to the detriment of the company's interests. Now, back to Krafton's side of things, there's another article on WCCF Tech that details Krafton's firing back about the allegations against them. So in statements that put out, they're basically claiming that once Krafton had successfully acquired Unknown Worlds, apparently Cleveland and McGuire took their earnings from the sale and, quote, quickly lost interest in developing Subnautica 2. So according to the filing, Cleveland and McGuire abandoned their roles as studio-wide game director and technical director to focus on their personal passion projects and quit making games for Unknown Worlds entirely. And Gil, who remained, focused on leveraging his operational control to maximize the earnout payment rather than developing a successful game. So they also claimed that Cleveland had left video game development to pursue filmmaking, which Krafton had mentioned before during the course of the lawsuit. So according to the article, Krafton goes on to allege that 2 months prior to Cleveland, McGuire, and Gil claiming the game was ready for an early access launch, The development lead on Subnautica 2 said the first stage of early access for the game would be about 12% of our intended 1.0 scope, and that the lead joked the game would be in development for 30 years at the current pace it was going earlier this year. To further its point about Cleveland and McGuire leaving their post, Krafton claims the two co-founders declined to return to their roles as game director and technical director, and that Gill had even stated there's no coming back to a job they didn't have. Following that, Krafton includes a statement allegedly from Cleveland in which Cleveland admits that Subnautica 2's development began with the intention of having a younger generation of development talent at Unknown Worlds take the helm for the sequel, and that he knew he wasn't going to be running that team from the beginning. Now, personally, there are several ways that this can be seen. So, again, the game's being launched into early access. So I guess at best there was probably discrepancy between Unknown Worlds and Krafton as to what would constitute an appropriate amount of material for early access. Because, like I said earlier, like we've had cases where games been launched into early access and been left basically unfinished. But with a franchise with the degree of Subnautica, personally, I don't think that's the case. But I guess looking at that from Krafton's point of view, that would be where 12% of 1.0 at a early access launch would be a bit concerning. But again, going back to developers themselves, it would depend on like how much they're pushing forward with the actual development, you know, integrating player feedback, improvements, and all that stuff. And also from Cleveland's comments, if they're to be believed, it doesn't seem like he was abandoning his post so much. If you look at it from his point of view, right, it doesn't seem like he's abandoning his post as much as it is that he's basically hoping to pass off the reins to a new generation. So maybe he was doing his filmmaking, like instead of abandoning game development completely, he could simply just put the product out in a way so where these new guys can take it over. So it's personally working in software engineering and software development. I personally had times where I've left one job for another, and one of the things I'd have to do was train the people up under me, or at least my co-workers, to know how to carry on certain things when I'm gone. Of course, this is when I'm not being laid off and shit. Now I want to switch back over to the lawsuit that's being filed against the owners by Unknown Worlds themselves. Now there's a separate article on WCCF Tech about that as well. Now the lawsuit by Unknown Worlds is pretty much alleging the same things that Krafton is saying, that the three co-founders had basically abandoned their post and were planning to release a substandard version of the game so they can try to earn that $250 million bonus. Now the question here though is, was this suit filed independently by the Unknown World staff itself, or were they filing this lawsuit on behalf of Krafton? Because this could be seen as Krafton putting pressure on the developers, you know, try to get the former co-founders to play ball. But that was basically my point. Now on the flip side, they basically mentioned that there is theft of confidential information to pursue personal financial gain. So let's go back to the timeline a little bit, because this is where things start to twist around. So on September 19th, a report revealed that the court denied two of Krafton's motions, and Krafton seemingly U-turned on one of its key arguments regarding why the co-founders were fired in the first place. Now this next bit of info comes from an article by Vicky Blake on the gamesindustry.biz website. So I'm just going to go ahead and read directly. Quote, "The founders and former leadership team of Subnautica 2 developer Unknown Worlds have successfully blocked Krafton's request for a court-order protective order, claiming the publisher changed its story mid-litigation about why it fired the founders and seized control over Unknown Worlds. New court papers from September 12 and seen by Games Industry Biz confirmed the court dismissed Krafton's forensic inspection request, without prejudice and also denied Krafton's order compelling preservation, calling the request unnecessary. Both parties are now expected to meet and confer. Details of the legal complaint against Krafton Inc. by the former leadership of Subnautica 2 developer Unknown Worlds became public in July. The complaint concerns a $250 million bonus payout tied to revenue targets for the 2025 early access release of Subnautica 2, which the former shareholders of Unknown Worlds Entertainment, represented by Fortis Advisors LLC, allege owners Krafton Inc. sought to avoid payout by delaying the game using pressure tactics. In his defense, Krafton accused the three former leaders of then threatening to self-publish Subnautica 2, releasing it without Krafton's backing, marketing, promotion, or distribution. This, Krafton claims, left it with no choice but to terminate their employment. The company also alleged that Max McGuire, Ted Gill, and Charlie Cleveland downloaded tens and thousands of company files and emails in the lead up to the termination, and claimed that the former leadership refused to return or at the very least confirm what devices and confidential information remain in their possession. Now, the founders claim that while Krafton initially alleged it fired them because of the founders' supposed intention to proceed with a premature release of Subnautica 2 and withdrawn game readiness as a grounds to justify its actions, it has now pivoted to a new theory that it admittedly came up with only after the fact, that it terminated the founders and seized control because the founders backed up files they were entitled to, that they were entitled to access in their work for Unknown Worlds. Krafton's disorganized retreat raises more questions than answers, the court filing stated. To say that Krafton's new theory is a Hail Mary would be an understatement, because both the downloads were not wrongful and because Krafton claims to have not learned of them until after it had fired the founders. The downloads cannot have been the actual motivation for termination. Consequently, lawyers for former CEO Ted Gill, co-founder and executive director Charlie Cleveland, and co-founder and CTO Max McGuire requested that the court deny Krafton's request for a forensic inspection, as well as dismiss a motion for a protective order on the grounds of its shift in theories. Okay, clear as mud, right? So basically what they're saying is that Krafton is walking back their claim that they fired the three because they were planning to release a substandard version of the game and instead had downloaded confidential information. So this is kind of why I'm thinking that the Unknown Worlds lawsuit against them is actually a Krafton lawsuit against the trio, because like what they said to WCCF Tech in an email, that the lawsuit is a direct response to their misconduct, including the theft of confidential information and attempts to pursue personal financial gain to the detriment of the company's interests. See, that's what they said. And that's kind of what Krafton was claiming, that they had took apparently material and were planning to release the game on their own without Krafton's backing. But like the games industry biz article points out, like this actually they actually learned about this after they were fired. So I'm no legal expert, so I'm not quite sure if this would actually apply. This would actually be a valid defense against them. Now, to keep it fair though, again, as a person who works in IT, one of the things we're drilled on is access to confidential information. Like virtually every job I've had in tech had some kind of training about it. And one of the things is, and like one of the sticking points is that you don't download information on stuff that you're working to anything that's not company property, like flash drives, your personal cloud account, your personal email, and shit like that. So there could be a chance that the three could have been walking off with confidential information. But circling back to the early access release and the claims that they were going to put out a subpar version of the game, to me, if that's a legit reason to fire them in your eyes, why would you walk that back as one of your defense claims? Now, continuing on the timeline, so on September 24th, new motions from Krafton alleged that the founders stole what Krafton effectively called a blueprint for Subnautica in an attempt to further its argument that the co-founders intended to release Subnautica 2 on their own. So basically that's basically a restating of the whole they took confidential information from us and we're going to plan to release it on their own. There's another article that goes into further detail, but I think we're going to move on and I'll just link that in the description for those who want to read. Now here's where it gets really interesting. On November 18th, the co-founders and their legal team alleged that Krafton's plan to avoid paying the $250 million earnout was codenamed Project X internally within Krafton, and Krafton's chief officer Chang-Han Kim asked ChatGPT how to avoid paying Unknown Worlds the $250 million bonus. Now at first Krafton denied this, but according to court transcripts that were released a few weeks ago, he pretty much admitted this. So quote, "I started discussing this matter with various teams within the company to figure out what we could do." Kim testified in his deposition via translator when asked what he did when he discovered that Subnautica designer and director Charlie Cleveland and Unknown Worlds co-founder Max McGuire weren't directly involved in the development of Subnautica 2. So I talked to the legal team, the finance team, and the corporate team, and the PR, all these various teams, and I also actually searched on ChatGPT to get faster answers to figure out what kind of rights we have. When asked why he would consult with ChatGPT on a matter like this, Kim said, "I think, just like everyone else, I am using ChatGPT to get faster answers or responses, just like Google search." So I had to laugh at that. So on a side note, Krafton has been billing itself as an AI first company. A few months ago, they said that they will invest roughly 100 billion Korean won, which translates to close to $70 million in a GPU cluster to, quote, support multi-stage tasks requiring sophisticated reasoning and iterative planning and serve as the foundation for accelerating the implementation of agentic AI. Another 30 billion won, which is $21 million, will be allocated annually beginning in 2026 to actively support its employees and directly utilizing and applying various AI tools to their work. And this is another article on PC Gamer, and I'll make sure to link to all these in the description. So already they're pledging to use generative AI, so I guess it makes sense that the CEO is going all in by asking ChatGPT for legal advice. So there's a little bit more to this too. So according to a pre-trial brief that was obtained by the website Game Developer, again I'll be linking to this in the description, there's a claim that Chang-Han Kim felt that the acquisition of Unknown Worlds was too costly, and that if they paid out the $250 million bonus payment, then he could be seen as being a pushover. Now there's also Slack messages between him along with CFO Richard Yoon that discuss the prospect of a takeover. And reading that now got me thinking that, again, the Unknown Worlds lawsuit against the 3 former employees seems to be Krafton, less Unknown Worlds and its employees, and more of Krafton, because they're making the same claims here and there. And when you got CH Kim talking about Chang-Han Kim and Richard Yoon talking about this takeover, and keep in mind this was back in these Slack messages were back in June, so it kind of like adds up more to the narrative here. Going back to the timeline, because there's one more item that pops up here. So on November 20th, Krafton claimed that the co-founder Charlie Cleveland made racist comments regarding Korea in his preparation notes for the litigation between Cleveland and his fellow co-founders and Krafton, and that Cleveland said history will remember that Krafton was bad. Now that is a serious allegation. So here's another article on WCCF Tech. So let's take a look at it. Alright, so quote, "This morning, Krafton shared 2 files with the press. One of them is the sworn testimony of Unknown Worlds founder Chris Cleveland in the Delaware court, and the other is a document written by Cleveland as quote-unquote litigation help while he prepared for the legal battle. Cleveland himself submitted the document into evidence, and now Krafton has underlined that several of his comments demonstrated racist views toward Korea and its people, as well as the unwavering conviction that the Korean developer would ultimately be seen as the villain of the story. Here are a few excerpts. Apparently this is Cleveland's, apparently these are Chris Cleveland's words. Korea, they are the Joe Pesci of countries, charming until they're incredibly nasty. It goes to 11 quickly, no filter. It can be emotionally draining dealing with this, especially as male Westerners. Korean seems to be implied. Males might be more problem solvers and bring less emotion. Their biological reason for this, making games is about problem solving. Korea has been surrounded by enemies who want to kill them. They are fighters, it's small and nasty. Every year, some big film star commits suicide because of sex, drugs, or something hounded by press. Delaware will say that this is a bunch of sadistic Korean assholes like Samsung John Pleasance. They've cast as out as villains and it's done. Delaware? Oh, they're fucked. You don't even need a Korean lawyer. History will remember that Krafton was bad. Even the Reddit crowd hates them because of Dark and Darker. We're playing the house's money and we're the home team. We don't need to worry about these guys or our reputation. History will remember that Krafton was bad. In the testimony, and this is getting back to the article itself, in the testimony, Cleveland admitted to saying last year that Unknown Worlds was no longer a place he really wanted to work at, and also that he was semi-retired and only working on a Subnautica movie in some capacity. For their part, Krafton noted that he is now instead looking at being reinstated, and Cleveland replied that he is fired up now. Okay, and the rest of it goes back into like the other stuff that we talked from the lawsuit filings back in July to Kim asking ChatGPT, but nonetheless, the comments that Cleveland made kind of are not a good look, to say the least. Like, just saying shit about that as a country, like, even if they are in the right here, these aren't the kind of comments that you want to go on legal record talking about. Now, it's easy to cast like Krafton as the bad guys and the three devs that are being wronged, and Krafton has been making a lot of bad moves. Definitely, consulting ChatGPT for legal advice is one of them. But it's more clear cut and so. Well, let me walk that back. So basically, on the three co-founders, they're alleging that they were ripped off, like they were fired, so they wouldn't have to pay them their bonuses, and they delayed the game so they wouldn't have to pay them their bonuses. Meanwhile, Krafton's claiming is that they abandoned their post, and that they had walked off, and that they had downloaded confidential company information. And earlier they had said that they were going to release a subpar game just to try to cash in, but then they kind of distanced themselves from that claim. So that's why it's looking sketchy on both sides, because we don't know. Because again, I said what I said about early access earlier. We don't know like what constitutes an amount of content for an early access release or will be appropriate for that or up to their standards. But then again, we don't know if it's true that they walked off with confidential information. But even with that, Krafton didn't find out about this until after the fact. So there's a lot of different layers to this lawsuit, and this is basically a mudslinging contest, like back and forth. I'm more on the side of the co-founders, but again, because there's a lot of sketchy shit going on with Krafton itself. But I guess we'll learn more about this as the lawsuit goes forward. Hopefully, for fans who are waiting for Subnautica 2, hopefully we'll hear about a release date pretty soon. And so let's put it this way. Hopefully if there will be more content when it hits early access next year. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. And wow, this is nearly a half hour, and that's before I do the editing and cut out the little pauses and shit like that. But yeah, again, let me know what you think. And to the kinfolk out there who are fans of Subnautica, is this going to affect your decision on whether or not to purchase Subnautica 2? Let me know. Moving on, here's the latest in the acquisition of Electronic Arts. So for those that haven't been keeping up, the Saudi royal family, along with Silver Lake Investments and Jared Kushner, who's Donald Trump's son-in-law. His company Affinity Partners is in talks to take over Electronic Arts to the tune of $55 billion. According to a recent investigation by the New York Times mentioned by an article by TechStory.in, it looks like the acquisition may be in danger, or at least it might be under heavy scrutiny. So the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which is a cornerstone of the Saudi Vision 2030 campaign. Vision 2030, as you may or may not know, is part of the Saudi royal family's efforts to whitewash their record of human rights sorry about that. Anyway, it's a part of the Saudi royal family's attempt to diversify their economic portfolio in order to not be dependent on oil. So this includes investments into stuff like sports, entertainment, and of course video games. So they've already got stake in companies such as Nintendo, Capcom, and they own the majority of SNK. So of course now they're looking to add Electronic Arts to that portfolio. Now through the Public Investment Fund, the Saudis have been pouring a lot of money into projects, and this seems to be taxing the reserves. So one of the more prominent projects they're splurging on is a futuristic megacity called NEOM. That's NEOM. So apparently their plans to have a desert ski resort, a mirrored skyscraper, a floating industrial zone. So basically they're trying to build like cyberpunk, so to speak. And alongside these projects, there's been some other rather sketchy investments. There's a government-backed coffee chain that only operates just a single cafe, a cruise line with only one vessel, and an electric vehicle manufacturer that within 3 years has yet to deliver a car. So it's easy to see why people are looking at this as a very sketchy investment. Now the Saudis can't simply just ramp up oil production just to, fill the coffers here. The thing is, the kingdom still has to adhere to output limits that are set under OPEC agreements. OPEC being, of course, the organization of the petroleum exporting companies. And of course, me thinks that the whole point of this public investment fund, or the whole Vision 2030 thing, is to whitewash the killing of an American damn, sorry about that. Must have been something I ate or some shit. But anyway, I kind of think that the whole point of this thing is to not be dependent on the killing of Jamal Khan. Damn, it keeps happening to me for whatever fucking reason. But yeah, anyway, I keep thinking that the whole point of this is to not be dependent on the foreign oil. Now, the deal is set to be complete in early 2027, so we still have a ways off, and who knows what other challenges could rise up between now and then. So, of course, along with this, there is the bigger concern of a cultural impact of Saudi Arabia's ownership over Electronic Arts. So, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal, and I'm reading this on MSN.com, so the Saudi Public Investment Fund will own 93.4% of Electronic Arts, and that leaves Silver Lake taking 5.5% and Affinity Partners only owning 1.1%. So that is definitely a very concerning number if that agreement goes through. As you may know, if you've been listening to this podcast, the Saudis currently own a majority of SNK. We kind of saw, and I discussed a few weeks ago how these things affected, the new Fatal Fury game. Having the DJ, DJ, what's his name in the game, and also having Cristiano Ronaldo as a player in the game, and having the game heavily promoted at events like WrestleMania. So who knows what kind of plans they could have. But as always, I'll keep you posted. So lastly, I want to talk about last week's big news, Netflix being in talks to purchase Warner Brothers. Now, the deal is still going to take another year to complete, and there's going to be some competition from Paramount Skydance. But so the deal is going to be valued at $82.7 billion, and obviously you're going to own a bunch of media franchises. But what's not being discussed a whole lot is what this is going to mean for Warner Brothers game studios. So as you know, Netflix has their own little games app. Like they've been trying to get into the gaming space, but like they really haven't put out like anything that's really big or must play. As a matter of fact, there's been a number of cuts and studio closures this past year. So most notably, their AAA studio called Team Blue, which was based out of Southern California, that was closed down, and the developer Spry Fox was sold back to the company's founders. Spry Fox is working on a massively multiplayer online game called Spirit Crossing. Now, recently, they've announced that Red Dead Redemption is going to be available on Netflix games, so it's clear that they totally haven't given up on it. But as for a clear direction, it's we really haven't seen much of that yet. Now, they've been acquiring like smaller developers such as Night School Studio, who creates Oxenfree. Now, if the Warner Brothers purchase goes through, then basically Netflix now owns Rocksteady, who makes the Arkham games, NetherRealm Studios, obviously Mortal Kombat and Injustice. There's Avalanche, and there's TT Games that makes the Lego games. Now, of course, Warner Brothers' game division has been struggling, but I wouldn't say to the point of a Netflix per se. They closed down studios of their own like Monolith and Player First. Now they're busy. Now one of their bigger successes was the Harry Potter game Hogwarts Legacy from 2023, and of course one of their more notable failures was Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League from last year. So the main gaming franchises of Warner Brothers Gaming are Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, DC Comics, and I believe Lord of the Rings. Now, if Netflix is smart and they want to get serious about their gaming division, they've got several new studios that they can now work with. And of course, they own like tons of IP they can use. Like maybe TT Games doing a Lego Stranger Things. Or, I don't know, a BoJack Horseman fighting game from NetherRealm. Yeah, that would be pretty much on brand for them. Imagine a BoJack Horseman fighting game. Or maybe we'll have characters from Castlevania showing up in the next Mortal Kombat. Well, that'll be more of a Konami thing than a Netflix thing, but yeah, you get the idea. Or maybe we can get characters from Orange is the New Black showing up in the new Mortal Kombat game. But like I said earlier, time will tell because there's still a year before this thing is complete, and who knows what could happen between now and then. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. So now that we made it through all that, I want to talk about my recommendation for this podcast, and that is none other than Bloodshed. Bloodshed is developed by Com8 Com1 Software, and it's published by Head Up. It's basically Vampire Survivors as a retro throwback shooter. I know some people like the word boomer shooter, but I hate that word, so we call them retro throwback shooters. So it's basically Vampire Survivors in an FPS. You pick one of several unlockable heroes. You try to last for as long as possible while stacking up those mega builds. So it's everything you like about Vampire Survivors, except it's in hardcore horror FPS. And if you like old school games like Blood, it has that same vibe and aesthetic. So it's called Bloodshed, so check it out. Matter of fact, it's on sale on Steam for only $4.41 until next Monday, December 15th. So if you want another cool shooter, then check it out. Also, if you're looking for some great games to play this holiday season, my Fanatical.com affiliate link is below in the description. Fanatical has tons of great sales on upcoming, new, and older video games. They got tons of great bundles where you can combine and save. Also, they even got stuff like comic books and manga bundles. So again, if you're looking for some great stuff to play, some great stuff to read, check it out. My affiliate link is in the description. Anyway, that was all for this podcast. This episode of Will Talks About Games. It is Tuesday night as I record this, so it'll be up Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, just whenever. Again, for those of you who are watching outside the YouTube channel, or even if you are on YouTube and you just haven't subscribed, I got tons of great stuff on here. You're not going to miss it. I do live streams almost every Sunday. I do I do reviews, previews, trailer reactions, hardware unboxings, all kinds of cool stuff. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I will be streaming the Game Awards at 7:15 p.m. Eastern. I'm streaming it on YouTube, Bijo Live, TikTok, and on Twitch. So be there, don't be square. Anyway, until next time, I'm Audi 51,000 G Ken folk.